All right. And we are live for another Leadership Live with one of the OGs, one of the original gangsters of LinkedIn Lives, Miss Jillian Kaplan, one of my best friends, and just an incredible thought leader. So, Jillian, welcome. Thank you for joining.
Thanks. Yeah, I actually, maybe we did do the first live together. Maybe we started the whole thing. It's been like years though at this point, right?
There were supposed to be 3 of them. And then a very close friend of mine reached out at a wonderful company and said, "Boy, did I offend you? Is everything okay?" And I'm like, "Gosh, of course. Why?" And they were like, "Well, you didn't invite me to your podcast, your video cast." Like, there is no such thing. And then, yeah, like you said, this is 2 years later. We've had some truly incredible humans on this live and have had some incredible conversations, some very scary conversations about risky topics and controversial topics and uncomfortable topics, but that's what's fun about it. And in today, speaking of uncomfortable topics, we are talking about personal branding. You and I recently wrote a guide together that is doing incredibly well. So thank you for everyone who's downloaded it. It is free and ungated. I will drop the link below. But I wanted to deep dive into personal branding. But before we do that, for the rare, few people who don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So my name is Jillian Kaplan, and I've been working in telecom for over 19 years. So sort of a subset of the tech industry. And while that's, my 9-to-5 job, I've always had a passion for equity and inclusion and really helping people. And so when I find something that I'm decent at, I try to sort of pay it forward and help other people find their brand in this case, right? And that's where you and I came together. So I think it's really important that, it's not when people like watch me on social media, they're like, "Oh, well, how much of your job is social?" 0% of my job is social media. I control none of the company handles. This is my own brand and something that I've decided to build, and it's not my job. And sometimes that's what makes it fun, right? Because it's not your job. So you can be a little bit more creative and a little bit more liberal with what you share.
Yeah. And I'll have to, we don't have time because these lives are so short, but I will have to drop the link in the comments below so you can kind of understand how Jillian and I even became friends. In part, it was because of your brand, in the way you are so really intentional about your brand and the way you go about it. And you wrote a little bit about that in the guide. So let's dive in. I mean, tell us a little bit about the guide. Why is it different than why this one out of all the other personal branding stuff that's out there?
I think a lot of it has to do with ensuring that your voice is heard alongside if you work for a corporation or you work for someone else, right? Making sure that when you're developing your brand, that your voice is front and center, but you can still, be a microphone for the company as well. And I think that's really important because I think a lot of people, when they think about sharing stuff for their company, think about it in terms of kind of a copy paste sort of bot situation. And I don't think that's bad. And I'll preface this by saying, please make sure you follow all of your company's social media rules. Don't go rogue on us. But the reality is that, a lot of people think of it as okay, well, I'm just going to copy paste and get something up there. And while that's not bad, there's nothing wrong with that. It's not going to develop your brand. You're just going to be sharing, exactly the verbiage that is coming from the company. Once again, not bad, but not in your voice. So what's different about this guide is it allows you to really discover who you are. Make sure you hone in on those topics very clearly, because I think that's very important to really not necessarily have one thing you always talk about, but in the guide, we talk about 3 to 5 things, right? So understand why would people want to come to your page? What are they going to learn about? Right. And I just did a reintroduction post because I think that's incredibly important. Like, I have a lot of new followers. So I want people to know, hey, this is what you're going to hear from me. And one of my biggest goals that I always say is that I want people to know it's me posting before they see my name. I want to have a voice that people recognize. And obviously, it's not a real voice, although I do some videos, right? Here we are. This is my voice. But a voice that people recognize. And I think that that's really, really important, that people say like, oh, okay, that's clearly Jillian talking, and that's who she is.
And you highlighted a couple of things that I want to make sure, kind of stand out here, which is one, it doesn't have to be completely separate from your day job. That can be a component of who you are. And it should be, right? Because it is a component of who you are as a human. But maybe, you're really great at thought leadership. So yes, there's Dell components to it, but you're also inserting your own opinions about what's going on in the industry and market trends and things like that. And then you're also deciding, hey, here's who I am, or here's who I want to be. And then leveraging that to kind of complement or complete and fill out the rest of your personal brand. And it should be recognizable. Just like when you go out and you see a commercial or you see an advertisement, you usually know who it is. If I tell you a green lizard, you know who you're thinking about. Or there's just certain components, and that becomes the brand part of the personal brand. And then the other thing you said is it should be something that's important to you. Like you talked about your genuine passion around DEI, diversity, inclusion, and equity. It should be something that you're really passionate about. People should know, when I go to Jillian's page, this is what I can expect. And I think that's something that can be overlooked. I know that can be, that's something that's scary, because even in my recent post, I talked about how terrifying posting is for me. I was just on a call the other day with an executive at Cisco, and he's like, I feel like I'm talking to a LinkedIn star. And I'm like, listen, do you understand how terrified I am when I post these things? And so I think it can easily feel like it comes off naturally, or like, oh, well, Jillian's just always good at it. She's got all these followers. Everybody loves Jillian. And you talk about this in other, podcasts and things that we've done together. But it's not always easy, one. And you build a following over time by being consistent and authentic. Would you say, is that fair?
Yeah. I mean, we talk about in the guide too. I think that was one of our steps. Like the other things that we've written, this guide really focuses on action. So when you read the guides that Sabrina and I have wrote, it's more on like step by step, how do I do this? Because I think that one of the things, and this is just a broad thing, but one of the things that people struggle with is they listen, they read, and then they don't know what to do. So yes, consistency is super key. I said this a million times, but only my mom liked my posts at first too, right? And it's going to grow. Like if you're authentic and sharing what feels good for you, it's going to grow. And, one of my 3 to 5 things is that I've been in the telecom industry for 19 years, right? But I share it in sort of a different way. I have an engineering background. I sit in the product marketing organization now, specifically focused on thought leadership. But for me, like, because I have that engineering background, I feel like I can understand a lot of the technology, and I can make things really simple without, necessarily confusing people. And I think that's my superpower, is that like, I understand the technology, I can simplify it, and I can tell a story with it.
Mm-hmm. And you hit on something that I get asked about constantly, and I know you do too, because we've talked offline about this, is people think that it's almost like a microcosm of imposter syndrome, where they go, well, I have nothing to say. Or why would people want to hear from me? Or my background is so different than XYZ, or fill in any other excuse or sort of, fear. And by you talking about, listen, this is my vast background. I was first in engineering, then in product marketing, then in thought leadership. And you kind of look at the different pieces. You help build your own story and your own differentiation. And that's the value. You're supposed to be different. That's what makes you unique. And that's your personal brand. So a lot of times what people are scared of is really what they should be doubling down on, in my opinion. That's what you should
Totally.
be most excited about.
Yeah, embracing your weirdness.
Yeah.
Because we're both a little weird. But you'll
I
notice,
remember.
like, if you follow, our content isn't the same. The way we talk
Right.
about things, right? Like, we're both focused on DE&I, so we certainly share stuff about that, but we share in different ways because our voices are different.
Right.
Don't try to be me, because then it's
Right.
not going to come off as authentic. That's the biggest comment I get. I know you were saying the guy from, or the person from Cisco was commenting like, "Oh, I feel like I'm talking to a LinkedIn star," right? That's the biggest comment I get is like, "Wow, your posts always come off as so authentic." Because they are.
Right.
I'm glad they come off that way, because that's I talk from, and I'm not talking about like talking from your heart and like, sharing a ton of personal things. I'm
Right.
talking about like, I'm sharing things in my own voice that feels good for me,
Mhm. And what I like about the guide and the way we write together is that, to your earlier point, it's step by step. First, we did the same thing with the art of the subtle brag. How do you post a subtle brag? And if you haven't checked that out, I'll drop that in as well. It's also free and ungated. Everything Jillian and I do is totally free and ungated. Just to her earlier point, to invest in other people the way, to maybe give you some lessons that we've learned along the way or learned from our mistakes. But sort of in this personal branding journey of my own, I was so terrified and continue to be scared. And you're the one who lovingly pushes me to say, post it or do it or come on. What got me over that sort of initial fear of doing this, because I know we're going to get comments about it, because we certainly have before, is it's not about you entirely. And you've said this before, turn your mess into your message. When the art behind the art of the subtle brag, which is part of your personal brand, is you're saying, I did this and you can do it too. And when you realize that it has less to do about you and more about other people, hopefully inspiring other people, hopefully engaging other people, driving conversations, normalizing topics that maybe should be and haven't yet, or maybe giving your 2 cents to a group that needs to hear from you. Again, it's less about you. And for some reason that works for me. And I notice even in our workshops, that works for a lot of our audience members. Anything else you would add there, or anything I'm missing there?
No, I mean, I I think you nailed it. And I think if people take the time, our guides aren't super long. If you're
Right.
struggling to get started with, what you want to talk about, this will lead you through exactly what you want to talk about, how to do it, how to engage with others, how to be consistent, because that's really the key. You can't,
Mhm.
share once on social media and expect you're going to go viral. You might, but it probably won't
Yeah.
happen. And I think that it's really more about the consistency than like the, virality, if you will.
Mhm. And I'll say just a note on consistency, because I've noticed that there's some people who are in my feed multiple times a day, and I'm like, that's too much for me. I post maybe once a month, and that's probably not enough, which is why it cracks me up when people are like, I see you all the time. And I'm like, how? I'm not posting. What are you seeing? So do you have any advice or guidance on sort of how do you find that happy medium? What's working? Maybe for folks who already have a brand, we tend to get a fairly senior level audience who watches these lives. So, they have a well-established career. Most of them are director level above, although we do get a fair amount of folks in the field, but they have a presence already, or at least, a title that in credibility, some background. But so any guidance for that specific audience on, okay, let's take your personal brand to the next level.
So the first thing I'll say is the reason people are seeing you is because of the engaging that you do with other people. So even if that's one of the tips we give in the guide is like,
Okay, yeah.
yes, be consistent, but also make sure you're engaging with others and exactly how often to do that and how, right? So that's the first thing I'll say. As far as like consistency, you have to pick a platform. And for me, like my main work platform, I use LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. I'm not an avid tweeter. I tweet more if I'm like traveling or at a show or something like that. But for the most part, I stick to LinkedIn, and I aim for 2 to 3 posts a week. That's my personal preference. I don't have a magic number, and algorithms are changing all the time. And I don't, honestly, in transparency, I don't spend a lot of time on this. That's the other thing. People are like, how long does this take you? 5 minutes, 2 to 3 days a week. I don't spend a lot of time on it. I just don't. And I think that's the beauty of it too, is you can build this in little pockets. So for me, it's 2 to 3 days a week. I tweet more if I'm like at a trade show, on the road. There's a lot of stuff going on. Otherwise, what am I going to tweet? Like sitting at my desk working, still sitting at my desk working, still here, you know? And I have a lot to say, and Twitter doesn't allow that many characters.
Sure.
So, you know, don't feel like you have to be everywhere.
Yes.
You know, and for me, like my Instagram and my Facebook and my TikTok are a little bit more personal. Like I don't never post work stuff on there, but most of the time it's personal stuff. Instagram stories is another one that I will be more active in Instagram stories from a work perspective if I'm on the road. Because that's like also a quick hit thing, sort of like Twitter.
And what about, you know, because you're known for your tech talks, you know, your TikToks about technology. What about the usage of video versus pictures versus just copy? Because sometimes that can be really powerful. What are your thoughts about kind of interchanging those or recommendations?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the shorter the better. Someone told me that you only have 7 seconds to capture someone's attention when they're scrolling. So your videos should be 7 seconds or less in reality, right? Unless it's like a webinar or something, which is why I do, you know, I call it 10-second telecom, right? Because that's what I try to focus on. You know, it's catchier than 7-second telecom, but I think it's what feels comfortable for you. Once again, what does your brand look like? Does your brand have photos of you? Does your brand have videos? Does your, you know, what looks authentic for you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That's the key, is the most authentic. And I found that, you know, some of these posts that get 100, you know, plus 1,000 impressions are usually the scariest. There's one where I posted myself crying. Don't know if you've ever done that. It's terrifying. But you know, I can't tell you how much outreach I've gotten from it and how many people have really gotten to know my heart and me as a person. I highly recommend you don't do it that way. But it was just an amazing moment with a really wonderful client of ours that was incredibly touching. And I decided to post about it because it was something that really was valuable to me as a human. And of course, had some correlation to work. But again, you have to find what's authentic to you. And that's what I really like about this guy too, and about the guidance around personal brand. Don't copy other people. Don't try to be something you're not. What I have found is that the more I am myself, it becomes this sort of natural filtration system where the people you want in your life gravitate more towards you, and the people you don't want in your life are kind of like, oh, what's that? And they get further away from you. And it's awesome. I used to be so afraid of offending people. Like, well, what if I say this? Now, of course, I am not someone who's extremely polarizing. I tend to be a little more Pollyanna than anything. And like you said earlier, I'm quirky, so I say funky stuff or whatever. But, you know, and I'm never trying to offend people. But when you come at it with, this isn't just about me, this is about helping other people, and this is my best, most authentic self, that's when I think you make the biggest impression. And there's some intrinsic value to that too. I think that's when you start to keep your own promises to yourself. And that's what builds true self-esteem. That's what negates imposter syndrome and some of these other things that people run into and kind of stifle us and our willingness to build our personal brand. Don't you think?
Yeah, 100%. You know, like when you just asked me, like, what should they post, video or text or photo? Back to your personal brand. It's you personally. You shouldn't post what you don't want to post, because that's not going to come off as authentic. And people will eventually find out.
Well, and people want to know the real you. That's the craziest thing about it. They want to know the good and the bad. And it's okay to post about the bad. And part of your personal brand, of course, is not just your public persona. There's also about writing articles and, like you said, engaging with different content. It doesn't just have to be on LinkedIn or a social media platform. There's other pieces of your personal brand, but that's a pretty significant one and has the biggest reach for the most minimal amount of work. So it's the biggest bang for your buck, in my opinion. Like you said, it's a few minutes a week. I think people overestimate how much time it's really going to take, and it's like, no, you just speak from the heart. A lot of times, in fact, several times just this week, people have said, hey, can you help me write this, or can you help me clean up this copy or whatever? If you ever need help, Jillian and I have said this at every single workshop we've ever done together. You are more than welcome to reach out to either one of us. I'll make sure, obviously, Jillian is tagged in this so that you have her contact information. And if you're not following her, you should, because she's just full of insight and fun and inspirational. It's good stuff. So
Mostly fun.
mostly
I'm funny.
fun. You are funny. That's good. People need to laugh more. But see, again, I'm Pollyanna. I just, I think there should be more happiness in this world. So I'm all for it. So anyway, we're already all over time. But Jillian, thank you. For those who maybe want to get in touch with you or want to find you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
I would say look at my tag on LinkedIn and reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's the best way to get in touch with me, for sure.
Cool. And any teasers on a new guide or any other teasers on something coming out soon?
Oh, we got lots of ideas. We'll see where things take us, for sure. But I feel like every time we think, oh, that's good, there's something else. So yeah, there'll be more.
I think we're going to have a few workshops coming up. We just did a happy hour with some of the Fear Forward community gang, and there was some ask for some workshops and stuff like that. And I have an idea around our next guide around boundaries. So we'll see. We'll see. Like you said, I guess we'll just see. So stay tuned. And Jillian, thank you. You're delightful and wonderful in all the ways. All right.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Bye.